Israel has decided to take over Gaza. Finally, after all this time, we are seeing common sense coming out of the Israeli government. But God forbid, Britain news networks are freaking out over this, and LBC, I believe it's a British news network, debated Eylon Levy, and Eylon Levy gave a great argument for why Israel should be able to basically take over the entire Gaza Strip. Check it out.
What I understand, Israel is looking at giving Hamas a final chance to release the hostages, or else Israel is going all in to bring down the Hamas regime. There is talk that the military operation won't begin until after President Trump's visit in the region, and that's in order to give one last-ditch effort to try to get the hostages out. Israel wants Hamas to give back hostages in exchange for an extension of a ceasefire. But what Israel is saying is the war that Hamas started on October 7th, with the October 7th massacre, which everyone will remember so vividly, cannot end with that jihadi regime still in power.
You mentioned the hostages, though. I mean, would it not have been an idea for them to be consulted, the families of which? The Hostages and Missing Families Forum said the plan is an admission by the government they're choosing territories over the hostages. So they don't think this is helping getting the hostages released at all.
This is an agonizing time for the families of the hostages, and in fact, they're divided. The Hostage Families Forum wants the government to pay any ransom to get their loved ones out, and you can't blame them. They're saying, release as many terrorists as it takes from Israeli jails, leave Hamas in power, we'll deal with them another day, just get our loved ones out. And they're saying that because they know the hostages are being starved and tortured and executed in the tunnels of Gaza. But there are other families who say, you can't negotiate with terrorists and you can't pay them a ransom. The only pressure that we have over Hamas is military pressure, and they think that military pressure is the way to get the hostages out. The fact is, no one has any good answers. No one has any perfect solutions. The hostages are suffering in the dungeons of Gaza, and Israel hopes now that the threat of a full military campaign will make Hamas wake up and say, we're going to release the hostages now.
Well, it's certainly one view, but we had this ceasefire that, of course, ended in mid-March, 6 weeks ago, and since then we haven't seen any of the 59 remaining hostages freed. So what makes the government think that added military might will actually help that? Because we've seen it hasn't worked over the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, well, the first stage of the ceasefire ended when the first stage of the ransom ended. Israel released terrorists from jails. It got back 30 or so hostages. And then Hamas was dragging out time, and it was surviving and keeping itself in power without releasing any hostages. So Israel went back to military action, but that has been very low intensity. And the idea now is that giving Hamas one last chance, or else Israel is going full in, will be the pressure that is needed in order to get those poor hostages out. And anyone who wants this war to end, and it has been going on for far too long, needs to pressure Hamas to accept what's been on the table since the very beginning of the war. The war ends tomorrow if Hamas releases the hostages and steps down from power.
We know that Donald Trump, the US president, is visiting the region in, I think, just a couple of weeks, actually. He's heading later this month. Do you think this has been discussed with the US president? Do you imagine in some ways this is trying to change the narrative ahead of his visit?
I imagine that Israel and the United States are very closely coordinated, because what Israel wants Hamas to accept now is the Witkoff framework. It is a ceasefire proposal made by the White House. And that ceasefire proposal says that the ceasefire will be extended as long as Hamas continues to release hostages. What it doesn't allow for is Hamas to remain in power. And I think everyone, at least Western governments, agree. I think it's still the position of the British government. The Hamas regime that launched the October 7th massacre, that is threatening to do it again and again, cannot remain in power after this war to continue to terrorize Israelis and oppress Palestinians in Gaza. Just yesterday, Israel took out a rocket launcher that was about to fire rockets at Israel. Just now, we're seeing how Hamas is stepping up its secret police and beating up and executing dissidents inside Gaza who are against its rule. And this reign of terror against Israelis and Palestinians cannot continue.
Do you think there's been some suggestion that Benjamin Netanyahu's been strong-armed by some nationalists within his cabinet? Do you think this has come from him, or is this him trying to keep his coalition together?
I think there is legitimate criticism to say that the Prime Minister is acting out of internal political interests, but the fact is Hamas is still a ticking time bomb. The Hamas regime can still fire missiles at Israeli cities And Israelis are saying enough is enough. We're not going to tolerate that threat. Hamas is still at large. The villages that were forced to evacuate on October 7th because people were slaughtered, people cannot go back home there as long as the Hamas terror regime is in power. So whoever is in the government in Israel, they're faced with the challenge of what to do about this jihadist regime that is an hour's drive away from Tel Aviv, that is hundreds of meters away from people's houses in the Gaza border area.
In terms of aid, understandably, there is a desire where possible to not have aid handed out by an organisation, a regime like Hamas. Completely understand that. But there are legitimate concerns when it comes to aid in southern Gaza, for example. The UN, other aid agencies have come out saying that what is being proposed in terms of aid will mean that the most vulnerable are still without vital supplies. I mean, surely that is a huge concern from this.
Yeah, it's important that aid reach the people who need it without Hamas being able to steal it in order to finance its own war machine. And that is what has been happening.
You need it to get there, though, don't you, Mr. Levy?
Of course. But here's the challenge that Israel is facing. You let aid into Gaza, and then Hamas, as the government of Gaza, is siphoning whatever it wants for its own forces and taxing the rest in order to finance its soldiers. There was a report in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago that Hamas is now struggling to pay its army because its funds have dried out because there are no more goods to tax. So Israel's saying, look, humanitarian aid should get to people. People should get food. But we cannot be financing Hamas's military machine by giving Hamas the resources to fuel its own army, right? There is a very difficult dilemma here.
Moving 2.1 million Palestinians to the south is not going to help the situation. You have already must have seen some of the reports about the destitution that many are in that part of the country. How on earth will that help?
Well, the best way to end the destitution is to end the war. And the war can end when the hostages are released and Hamas is removed from power. Suffering in Gaza is not going to end as long as a jihadi regime remains in power. The challenge is how you get aid to people without the terrorist regime in power stealing it. And what Israel has proposed is a very creative solution that will allow families to get aid without it going through Hamas. The UN, which has been complaining about this proposed mechanism, wants to have its cake and let Hamas eat it. And Israel is saying, after over a year and a half of war, a year and a half in which all the aid that has gone in has fueled Hamas's war machine, that aid has been extending this war because it has been literally financing Hamas's operations. Hamas has to be cut out of the picture. And anyone who genuinely cares about the humanitarian situation in Gaza is to work with Israel on ways to get aid to the people who need it, while making sure Hamas cannot steal it and use that aid and tax money, stuff that's being given by the generosity of the British taxpayer in order to extend this war a day longer.
I gotta be honest. I think Israel is failing in its duty to figure this stuff out. Literally, all you have to do, get the Gazans out. The answer is on the wall. Trump literally spoke it into existence, and this is exactly what we have to do. There's a problem in Gaza, and the problem is there's a bunch of innocent civilians, or people that are perceived as innocent civilians, that are in the way of Hamas. Get them out. Get them out. Get them to another Arab country. Get them into the Sinai. Get them away and away from Gaza. But nobody wants that. Nobody, every single pro-Gaza, pro-Palestine organization is, no, you can't get them out of Gaza. What? I thought you said Gaza is an open-air prison. Don't you want them to get out? Anyway, let's move on to some other stuff that's going on right now. Netanyahu met with a leader of another country, and he basically broke down what is going on in Ben Gurion Airport with a strike. The Houthis hit Israel, and Israel is vowing to avenge itself and hit Iran.
We're going to discuss our cooperation in many fields, political, diplomatic, economic.
I got to say, I don't really care about what he's saying with this president, but he did address the attack on Ben Gurion Airport from the Houthi missile.
Increases prosperity and security for our people, very strong action against them. And we always remember trade routes, obviously, were being challenged. The whole world is being challenged by the Houthis, including in the dastardly attack they did today near Ben Gurion Airport. We will not tolerate it. We will take very strong action against them. And we always remember that they act with their patron Iran's direction and support. We will do what we need to do to take care of our security, to respond effectively, and to give Iran a due warning that this cannot continue.
I'm very glad to.
So he threatened Iran. He also said that Israel will respond to Iran very soon, or sorry, not when, very soon, when it deems at its own, like whenever it wants to. Israel will respond to Iran whenever it wants to. That was his response to the Houthi attack yesterday on Ben Gurion Airport. I don't believe anyone was hurt, but it's pretty crazy that a normal country can be attacked like that. All right, here is one more clip of Trump actually talking about Iran and Iran's nuclear weapons. A lot of people are talking about this. They're like, what is going on? Is Iran going to be allowed to get nuclear
goal
weapons?
Of these talks limiting
This is on, I think, NBC.
Iran's nuclear program or total dismantlement?
Total dismantlement.
That's all you'll accept?
That's all I'd accept. Now, there's a new theory going out there that Iran would be allowed to have civilian, meaning to make electricity. But I say, they have so much oil, what do they need it for? But, I've seen it with other states where they're looking to do something and they have a lot of oil. Iran has tremendous energy. I put sanctions, if you know that. I put pretty strong sanctions.
All right, so he's saying no way, Jose, to the bomb. Iran cannot get a bomb. That is what he is saying. That is what the purpose of the negotiations are. I think Iran knows that if they did get a bomb or continue to persist, then there would be a military strike on their nuclear program, and that would end it effectively. Very interesting stuff here. I would say that I think Trump is, pretty dead set on this now because, again, he flip-flopped a few times. He has Steve Witkoff talking about how, they could get a bomb, maybe, perhaps. I'm not sure. Listen, if the negotiations are going to be they can get a bomb and they don't have to denuclearize, and then what's the point? Then Israel has to go ahead and take action. Regardless, I think that this is going to end in a military dispute. I mean, the Iranians are not interested in giving up their nuclear program. And I think Israel and America both have the technology capable of destroying this nuclear program. And I think it's only a matter of time before Israel takes action with or without America. For more, subscribe to the channel. If you want to help us make more of these videos, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/JewishUncensored. One other thing, this whole debate with the gorilla and the 100 men, it is a stupid debate. 100 men would absolutely annihilate one gorilla. It wouldn't even be a question. I mean, maybe the gorilla could withstand 15 to 20 people. Beyond that, it would get incredibly tired, and then the humans would just literally kick it to death. And I don't think it would be a fair fight at all. I think it's a stupid notion that one gorilla could take on 100 humans. For more, again, you can also go to our memberships page and join there. Thank you for watching, and have a good one.